These are people that haven't supported Rishi Sunak, that they were supporting Boris Johnson, but have basically turned against the party since Sunak came into power. There's a wild rumour doing the rounds that some of the money that's coming in to support them is coming from the Republican side of things, from the sort of Christian right over in the United States, which of course would be of interest because, you know, any other country trying to interfere in our parliamentary democracy would raise serious questions about the intent and the motive behind that.
Moving on to more traditional sorts of shenanigans, what do you know about the current status of plots to oust Rishi Sunak? There's a story in the Times today about rumoured rebels meeting up around Golden Cross House near Trafalgar Square when they're not above a gay club in Soho, I think it was. What do you know about all this?
Well, we've all been writing about this for several weeks, if not months now, about this group of 7 special advisors, the Secret 7, as I think that we once described them in a Sunday Times piece. And clearly there's a lot of intrigue as to who these people are. The one question that nobody has ever really been able to answer about this is where the money is coming from. And that's really the question that I want answered. Whilst it's fascinating to learn about where their hangouts are and which pubs and buildings they seem to be hanging out in, I think the really serious question in terms of our parliamentary democracy is who is funding them and to what aim and to what cause and at whose behest.
I'm not going to ask you to speculate as to who is funding them, but what kind of funder would we be talking about, do you think? Are we talking probably about a wealthy individual? Are we talking about some kind of business consortium? How does this sort of thing normally work?
So we're told that it's a group of donors. They've said that they're parochial. We've kind of gone through as many of the donors that you can possibly imagine, putting it to them that they may be the funders behind this. The suggestion being that these are people that haven't supported Rishi Sunak, that they were supporting Boris Johnson, but have basically turned against the party since Sunak came into power. There's a wild rumour doing the rounds that some of the money that's coming in to support them is coming from the Republican side of things, from the sort of Christian right over in the United States, which of course would be of interest because, you know, any other country trying to interfere in our parliamentary democracy would raise serious questions about the intent and the motive behind that. No one's been able to substantiate that, but a lot of MPs are seriously talking about it. So there's still a lot of questions that remain about this. And obviously, you know, if it was another country's or people affiliated or had interests in other countries, that would raise serious questions.
What happened to Lee Anderson? Lee Anderson, the Conservative MP, former deputy chair, no longer deputy chair because he resigned, he claimed yesterday that Islamists have got control of London and its mayor Sadiq Khan. He said of the first Muslim mayor of London, he has given our capital city away to his mates. Do you think there's going to be any action taken against him by the party for that? Because, I mean, a lot of people are saying his comments were both Islamophobic and racist.
Well, we are starting to see a major backlash here, and you are now starting to see some Conservative MPs also calling that kind of language and behaviour out. The thing I would say is that often it does seem to take some time for the whips to take notice of this. And, you know, I think back to the moment when we learned that an MP had been watching porn in the chamber, and it still took a number of days for action to be taken. And, you know, I think that on this particular occasion, given the discourse that we're seeing at the moment and some of the inflammatory language which is being kind of bandied around, and let's not forget that Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, sort of said similar things in an op-ed for The Telegraph only a few days ago, where she effectively said, you know, we've basically ceded power to the Islamists in this country.
Yes. Yeah.
Which, you know, I mean, everybody is entitled to their opinion, and obviously we have free speech in this country. But I also think that it's quite dangerous in a period of time when we are talking about MPs facing a serious threat level. And obviously the individual that you spoke to earlier about that mass lobby of Parliament, you know, they are also entitled to be there, to have their say. That is why we have a parliamentary democracy. That is why our Parliament is open to people to come into. That is why we have the systems in place that we do. And I do just feel that this kind of dog whistle language is incredibly unhelpful in terms of meaning that that debate becomes more difficult because it becomes much more polarised. And therefore, some of those processes that we would normally have, like allowing people into Westminster, can't happen because people start jumping up and down and getting very worried about it.
Yeah.
So there does need to be balance and there does need to be moderation, I think, in this debate for those very reasons.
Ukraine, as we said, it's the anniversary. What is the British government doing and saying today to mark the anniversary?
I think that they're being they're going to be quite bullish about the fact that they have led the support for Ukraine. They feel that they've done their bit. Certainly, we've had an announcement today, which obviously is about more munitions, which is what they so desperately need on the front line at the moment, with all those terrible reports that we're seeing on the second anniversary of fighters being on the front line with literally just homemade weapons to rely on. So, although it's not a lot of money that the government have put in on this occasion, it comes quite quickly on the back of the billions of pounds that we dedicated to the cause only a few weeks ago when the Prime Minister himself went to Kyiv to show solidarity with President Zelensky. And it's fascinating to see all the world leaders now turning up in Kyiv today, especially as, you know, I reflect on it myself. I was there just over a year ago for the first anniversary, and it's much more dangerous now than it's ever been, partly because they don't have so many weapons. They don't have the anti-aircraft repellent that they did. And also there are sort of hypersonic missiles kind of flying around now. And of course, no sort of reunion of the world leaders supporting Ukraine would be complete without Boris Johnson turning up, who, to his credit, has continued to fight and rally support for this cause. And I'm really interested to know what he's been saying to President Trump about what he might do if he comes into the into office again, because of course that is the spectre that kind of lingers over all of this.
Hangs over all of it,
yeah. What happens in November if we end up with the Trump presidency again, given what he said previously on sort of solving the crisis within 24 hours, and obviously the fact that he does have a relationship with Vladimir Putin, something most Western leaders don't.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's all. That's one to look forward to, perhaps. Turning to the other war of the moment. How do you reflect on the drama in Parliament this week involving Speaker Lindsay Hoyle and the vote over the call for a ceasefire in Gaza? What's the fallout from all of that?
I think it's yet to be determined, to be honest. I mean, the problem that we've got is that we've got, admittedly, a minority party, but the SNP effectively saying they have no confidence in the Speaker, and that is dangerous for parliamentary democracy on the basis that he is basically the referee in, you know, the equivalent of a football game, and if you lose confidence in the ref, things can quickly descend into chaos all the time. And I think there is a fear that there could be kind of more sort of low-level disruption from the SNP, who clearly feel hard done by. They feel that they were denied a vote on their opposition day amendment and motion, something they only get an opportunity to put to the Commons 3 times a year. But look, in terms of the Speaker himself, I think he would say that he made an error of judgment. Knowing the Speaker very well as I do, I think that he did it in his own mind for all the right reasons. He'd been going in and out of meetings with the security services and with the police, dealing with unprecedented threat levels against parliamentarians. He made the security of Parliament part of his sort of real promise to MPs when he became Speaker, that he was going to put their well-being at the centre of his offer. And I think that he thought by selecting all the amendments, what damage could be done there? Everybody gets their
Everyone gets to
say.
vote on what they want.
Yeah, and I think he was acutely aware that he was going to be criticised for that too. But it doesn't stop it from having been a huge row, and it doesn't stop it from causing him problems moving forward.
The threat level to MPs, you know, I mean, so Ben Jamal, the director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, he was talking to both the Times and Times Radio this morning, and he told supporters that he wanted Parliament to have to lock its doors because there was so much strength of feeling outside. And he said on breakfast this morning that large numbers themselves should not be intimidating, but a signal of strong opposition and so on. Is it unprecedented what's happening at the moment? Because there was so much there were furious crowds outside all the time, you know, during Brexit. I think anti-Brexit protesters turned up at Jacob Rees-Mogg's house once. I remember Anna Soubry being chased down by Brexit protesters. Just Stop Oil have been targeting MPs' houses. Is there something particularly new happening at the moment in relation to the Gaza vote, or are just people more edgy about it for whatever reason?
I think it's become cumulative. I think that's what, if you spoke to people who are dealing with the security day in and day out, would say, is that it's been getting worse for a long period of time. And yes, I think you're right. It sort of started with social media, particularly during the Brexit debate, which then descending into sort of people turning up at Parliament. You know, we all remember the loud hailers
Yeah.
all the time on College Green, and people turning up and behaving in a slightly intimidatory way towards MPs. But I think it has just become much more cumulative. And I think the thing that they worry about more and more is actually that the families of MPs have now become a kind of soft target. And actually that's something that is much more difficult to deal with and to be able to police and to provide protection for. And I think, you know, seeing the home of Tobias Ellwood, for example, being surrounded, seeing some of the statements that have been put out by the Just Stop Oil campaigners saying that they now see the homes of MPs as fair game, particularly when obviously MPs have got young children often. And so I think the threat level, from what I gather, has stepped up a notch over recent weeks and days. And I think, you know, the Middle East crisis does play a part of that, but it has just been a kind of trajectory that has been continuing for some period of time.
But again, I mean, you know, because we've gone through this, you know, the last, 10, 20 years ago, the last 10, 20 years, there has been a problem in Britain with sort of homegrown Islamist terror. You know, I'm old enough to remember when the threat was from the IRA. My father was in government. We were given special devices to check for bombs under the car.
Yeah.
There's not really anything like that going on at the moment, and yet MPs seem to be a lot edgier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. But I think if you're seeing people express their views much more freely in a way that perhaps they didn't during that period, when you're actually getting, you know, tweets and emails and all of the other modes of communication, you know, sending you very credible death threats and talking about, you know, very scary thing. And let's not forget that we have seen 2 MPs murdered in recent years. We've seen another MP who faced threats to be beheaded, you know, and there have been other credible threats to parliamentarians in a way that we haven't seen before. You know, that threat was there from terrorism, but, you know, there are now, you know, real fears about the kind of work that is done by lone wolves, and really not knowing who is going to walk into your constituency surgery must be a really unnerving thing for them.
A constant feeling of risk. No, I understand that. Before I let you go, Kemi Badenoch had a rough time at the start of the week. Is that all over, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think the particular row that she was involved in to do with the post office will rumble on to a certain extent. I mean, I think it kind of slightly ran out of road because there wasn't much more that could be substantiated about the kind of who was right and who was wrong. And this is to do with the claims that effectively a senior civil servant in her department had called for a kind of go slow on the compensation payments for sub-postmasters. But I think what it taught us about more than anything else was the kind of bombastic nature of Kemi Badenoch, who seemed to have quite a thin skin when it came to criticism, and felt that she needed to take, as she has done before, to be fair, to Twitter to hit back at her critics, something which can sometimes get you into hot water. As we all know in journalism, it's often the denials of a story that gets you into more trouble than the original claim. So I think it's one to watch, because if she is going to be a prominent figure moving forward in the Conservative Party, I'm not sure that these are the best tactics in terms of keeping the show on the road and not potentially blowing up early.
Maybe an anger management course is what is required there. Thank you very much indeed, Caroline Wheeler. And you can read Caroline, of course, in the Sunday Times tomorrow and all other Sundays.